Let's narrate the story of David and Goliath here, and what we can learn from it about trust, humility, success, and much more. David and Goliath is a story found in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17. It is not just an example of heroism in God's favor, but it is also full of life lessons. We can summarize it as follows. David was a young shepherd who tended to his father's sheep and played the lyre for the first king of Israel, Saul. When a war broke out between the Israelites and the Philistines, a giant named Goliath boasted that if any Israelite could fight and kill him, all the Philistines would become slaves of the Israelites. On the other hand, if he defeated that person, the Israelites would become their slaves. The Israelite army was afraid, and King Saul promised that anyone who defeated Goliath would receive his daughter in marriage, and their family would be exempt from taxes. Despite this, no one seemed brave enough to try. Then David appeared. Although he was seen as incapable of fighting against Goliath, Saul allowed him. With only his staff, sling, and 5 stones, David approached Goliath, declaring that God would deliver Goliath into his hands. As Goliath approached, David reached into his bag, took a stone, and hurled it, hitting Goliath in the forehead. Goliath fell dead to the ground, where David took Goliath's sword and cut off his head. What life lessons can we learn from the incredible story of David and Goliath? Lesson 1. Let's not underestimate anyone, including ourselves. Throughout the story, there were several instances where David was underestimated. David was underestimated at least 3 times. The first time was when his older brother, Eliab, saw that he was interested in the reward for killing Goliath. The Bible states that his brother burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 28. His brother only saw him as fit enough to tend to sheep. The second time David was underestimated was when he told King Saul that he would fight Goliath. What was Saul's response? Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 33. The third time, it was Goliath who underestimated David. When David approached Goliath, the Bible states that Goliath looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 42. David was underestimated 3 times by 3 different people. But in the end, he proved all of them wrong. We learn from this that in life, we should avoid underestimating people based on familiarity, age, appearance, or any other factor. Similarly, just because others make us feel incapable, we should not accept their opinions as true. Everyone has potential, and if we neglect others or ourselves, we will miss opportunities to fulfill some purpose. Imagine if David had let his older brother's comments discourage him, leading him to return home to the sheep. What would have been the outcome of the war between the Philistines and the Israelites? Similarly, what if Saul insisted that David was not capable of defeating Goliath and ordered him not to fight him? He would have missed out on solving the biggest problem at hand. Just as Saul saw that David didn't seem capable but gave him a chance, we should give people a chance even when they may not appear capable of handling it. Just like David, Whenever someone underestimates us, let's not allow it to hinder our progress. The opinions of others about us don't have to be our reality. Second lesson, trust is built in stages. That is, trust is built step by step. Have we ever wondered how the young David had the courage to fight against Goliath when Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified? The answer is found in the way David responds to Saul when Saul tells him that he is not capable of fighting against Goliath. David said to Saul in 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verses 34 to 37, David said, "Your servant has been taking care of his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." As we can see, David's confidence in his ability to defeat Goliath came from his experience in defending his father's sheep from lions and bears. Now we might be wondering, how did David get to the point of defeating lions and bears? It doesn't seem easy. On one hand, we must recognize what David recognized: the Lord rescued him from those animals. On the other hand, we cannot ignore that something had to build his confidence until he could trust in God and attempt to fight against lions and bears in the first place. Each achievement David made increased his confidence for the next challenge. In life, we may have the potential to accomplish great things, but our current confidence may lead us to believe that we cannot achieve those things. As we see with David, we must recognize that trust is built in stages. The challenges we are facing at this moment are preparing us for the greater challenges that lie ahead. Furthermore, just like in the parable of the talents, where the servants received different amounts, each according to his ability, Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 15, the only way to develop the necessary confidence to pursue greater things in life is to face the challenges that are before us. Third lesson, remain humble. The third life lesson to learn from David and Goliath is to remain humble. As mentioned earlier, when David explained to Saul why he was able to defeat Goliath, he acknowledged that it was not solely in his power, but that God had rescued him from lions and bears. Similarly, let's see what David said when he approached Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 45 to 47. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Notice that in every statement made by David, he mentioned God or Lord. He set his ego aside and credited God from the start. Similarly, wherever we find ourselves in life, we should remain humble and acknowledge who or what made it possible for us to be there. Ultimately, God makes all things possible, and like David, we should always recognize that. But if David continued to credit every individual who made it possible for him to defeat Goliath, he could have thanked his father and brothers for allowing him to care for the sheep. Caring for the sheep gave him the experience of fighting against lions and bears. He could have thanked Saul for finally giving his blessing to fight against Goliath. Taking it a step further, he could have even thanked Goliath for the challenge. Another example of someone who remained humble is Joseph, sold as a slave to Egypt. Joseph did something similar when he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. When Pharaoh told Joseph that he heard he could interpret dreams, Joseph said that he could not do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Genesis chapter 41, verse 16. Isaac Newton, who changed the way we understand the universe, said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." As we move forward in life, let us remain humble, not forgetting who or what made it possible. First God, who makes all things possible, and others who, whether for good or ill, have helped us move our lives forward. Fourth lesson, use what you have. The fourth life lesson to learn from David and Goliath is to use what we have. Besides the fact that young David defeated Goliath, one of the remarkable aspects of this story is what David used to defeat him. The Bible emphasized, "So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand. He struck down the Philistine and killed him." 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 50. If we could ask someone from that time if they thought David could kill Goliath with just a sling and a stone, they would probably have laughed. We see that Saul thought David needed military equipment when he offered David his own military gear. Goliath himself indicated that he was insulted by David's weapons when he asked David, "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 43. But in the end, everyone was shocked, especially Goliath. David saw the value in what he had in his hands. Although they seemed insignificant in a fight against Goliath, with all his weapons, they were not. Learning from this, even if we feel that what we have is not enough, we should still use it. Through God, we can be surprised by what we can accomplish with it. Complaining about what we don't have is a waste of time, and if we wait for everything, we may never do anything. Although ambitious, when David saw that he was bothered by Saul's military equipment, he could have concluded that he wasn't ready, but he didn't. Using what he had, he moved forward. As simple as using a household oven to start a cookie business or using a camera phone to start creating films, taking the time to think about what we already have that can be used can be a revealing experience. Fifth lesson, we must face our fears to progress. The fifth life lesson to learn from David and Goliath is that we must face our fears to progress. One interesting thing to note in the story of David and Goliath is what Saul asked David after he killed Goliath. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 58, he asked him, "Whose son are you, young man?" This is interesting because before this, David was already working for Saul, playing the lyre. In fact, when Saul asked for someone to play the lyre, 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 18, states, one of the servants answered, "I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man. And the Lord is with him. Now, How is it that Saul was informed about David but still asked him whose son he was? One reasonable argument is that Saul forgot. Another argument that satisfies the first one is that until then, David was not important enough to be remembered by Saul. But everything changed when he killed Goliath. This achievement marked a new era in David's life. In 1 Samuel, chapter 18, verse 2, it states, "From that day on Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family." David went on to successfully complete all the missions that Saul gave him, leading him to receive a high position in the army. David's accomplishments after killing Goliath show that in life, we must face our fears to progress. Parallel to the lesson of building confidence in stages, the second lesson, each fear we face corresponds to passing a stage that propels our lives. If we don't face them, we will continue to return to the same challenges in our attempts to move forward. We see how we can progress in life by facing our fears through David's example. But a notable biblical example of lack of progress due to not facing their fears that is worth sharing is when the Israelites were instructed to conquer the land God promised them. Because of their fear, instead of attacking the inhabitants of the land and immediately entering the promised land, they ended up in the wilderness for 40 years, with most of them never entering. Book of Numbers, chapters 13 to 14. Therefore, let us not let fear hinder our progress in life. We can all remember a point where we were afraid but still overcame it. Now, we can conclude that the story of David and Goliath is amazing. By applying the lessons it contains, we will undoubtedly live a more successful life. The lessons we have learned are, let us not underestimate anyone, including ourselves. Confidence is built in stages. Let us remain humble. Let us use what we have, and we must face our fears to progress. May God bless us.